We have 10 amazing Spider-Man movies, but only 2 of them are the Amazing Spider-Man movies. What happened to the original plan for this franchise, and what would I, as a fan with no screenwriting experience or any weight in their potential to return, do to finish? While in 2013, after the release of The Amazing Spider-Man 1, while having The Amazing Spider-Man 2 set to come out in the next year, the 3rd, 4th, and Sinister Six spin-off movies in this franchise were all greenlit by Sony. The Sinister Six movie would be released in the summer of 2016, with The Amazing Spider-Man 3 to be released in the summer of 2018. With the 4th movie coming sometime after all those. The Sinister Six team would feature, give me a second here while I read these off, Rhino, Doc Ock, Vulture, Kraven the Hunter, Mysterio, and Norman Osborn's Green Goblin, not Harry's. So this would actually be played by Chris Cooper, who died in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Apparently, the original plot lines for these feature movies would have Peter Parker discover some serum or some drug or some component of the story, if you will, that would bring back people from the dead. And the people who would come back would be people like Captain Stacy, Norman Osborn, and even Gwen Stacy would come back to life, and it was even rumored that she would become Carnage. Yeah, I'm not a fan of how this would have continued. There was even talks that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man would even die at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 3, and his torch would be passed on to an in-universe Miles Morales, which Andrew Garfield is quoted for saying this would be a beautiful and important moment for this story if it were to happen that way. But these movies, of course, got axed in the end of 2015, while in the same year, Sony agreed to let Marvel Studios and Disney use Spider-Man for the MCU in the upcoming Captain America Civil War. And so Sony then pivoted and decided to salvage their original ideas, where they would have movies like Venom and the Sinister Six, and create their own new universe using these Spider-Man characters without Spider-Man. And of course now we have Venom in 2018, Venom Let There Be Carnage in 2021, and Morbius in 2022, while next year in 2024, as I'm filming this in December of 2023, we'll be getting Madam Web, Kraven the Hunter, and Venom 3. But I believe that they secretly did not create a new universe. I believe that they're still using the Amazing Spider-Man Andrew Garfield universe, even ever since that first Tom Hardy Venom movie. They never stopped working on this. They just secretly pivoted to keep it all separated, and with the release of No Way Home, the logistical possibility of this still existing in the same universe and getting this Amazing Spider-Man 3 versus the Sinister Six is very, very possible here in the relatively near future. Now, let's go and take a look at a couple of connections that can help prove this theory. Now, number one is taking a look at the mural we see of Spider-Man being tagged as a murderer in the Morbius trailer. Now, I know only about 6 of us saw that movie, but in that trailer, we do see exactly that, a mural of Spider-Man being labeled as a murderer in downtown New York City. And there is a long-winded quote by the director of Morbius, basically stating that although it doesn't appear in the movie, he does have his own thoughts on it because he didn't make that scene. He strictly made the movie. Someone else filmed that scene for the trailer. He has his own thoughts about it, but because he's the director, he feels like he can't give his opinions or else they'd be taken out of context. So he kept his thoughts private, which I think was personally the smart move here. Now, why would Spider-Man be seen as a murderer? Number one is that J. Jonah Jameson just might have a bit more pull in this universe than in other universes, and people might listen to him a little bit more. Or, number two, is if this is truly Andrew Garfield's universe, we know that in No Way Home, he says that he stops pulling his punches sometime after the death of Gwen Stacy, presumably after the events of him battling the Rhino after he returns to being Spider-Man. Now, with that being said, we all know that if Spider-Man stops pulling punches, that he starts killing people, which would make him a murderer in the eyes of the public, which means that it would fit that Andrew Garfield would reasonably be in this universe with that tag confirming that the public does not like Spider-Man. Now, as a second little nod, as that at the end of Morbius in the post-credit scene, again, for the three of those people who decided to stay through the end of the movie, we of course see that Morbius meets up with Michael Keaton's Vulture from the MCU, who is teleported into this universe from the events of No Way Home. And Morbius, although acting heroically and is visibly sick whenever he performs something even remotely bad in his movie, he wants to go up against a hero like Spider-Man. That's kind of weird, isn't it? But the fact that he is willing to do that as a self-seen hero means that he should see Spider-Man as a villain in this mentality. So, Morbius is willing to go up as Spider-Man because he believes Spider-Man is a villain. If Andrew Garfield stopped pulling punches, then in this universe, he would be a villain. Now, the next piece of evidence is a bit more subtle than the ones that we see in the Morbius movies, and that is the theming with the cross-species genetics from the Amazing Spider-Man movies going into these Sony Universe of Spider-Man characters universe, which is, can I just say, like the worst name for a universe? I mean, it gets the point across, but I don't know. Leave your fun, creative ideas for this universe in the comments, because I would just love to hear what you guys would love to call this thing. So, the new movies in this universe still go over this cross-species genetics thing, where in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, we of course have Peter Parker, who crosses with a spider, Dr. Connors, who crosses with a lizard, and Max Dillon, who crosses with electric eels, creating Spider-Man, the Lizard, and Electro, respectively. Whereas in these newer movies, we have people like, Kraven the Hunter, who is seen to be crossing with that of a lion. You have Morbius, who of course crosses with a bat. And if you want to count Eddie crossing with the symbiote Venom, then sure. Even he crosses with another species. Now, assuming that Andrew Garfield does not reappear in Secret Wars, as that would throw a bit of a wrench in my whole plan here, I'm going to pick up as soon as we come out of No Way Home, and I don't see this movie being made anytime before 2026, and probably anytime after 2029. This would put Andrew Garfield being 46 at the oldest there in 2029, and that'd be the same age as Tobey Maguire was when making No Way Home. And whereas, opposed to making an Avengers movie, where you have a solo movie made for each of the heroes and have them team up against a common villain, now we have movies made for each of the villains and have them team up against a jaded hero, which I think would be a really cool flip on that formula for creating those team-up movies. Now, like I said, the plot would pick up right where No Way Home leaves off, as Andrew Garfield's Peter 3 is now coming back into his own universe, and he is now relearned his message of doing what's right all the time, and he has a quote-unquote healed soul after the events of No Way Home. But he has left New York City in the opposite feeling towards him. After he stops pulling his punches sometime after the death of Gwen Stacy and has started killing people, he's essentially tarnished his image of being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and has become essentially the Punisher with spider powers. New York City would actually side with J. Jonah Jameson almost 100% because what he now says is 100% true, and us as an audience are going to feel this kind of new view on a Spider-Man movie where J. Jonah Jameson is 100% right. Spidey has been a menace for the amount of years that he's been essentially back after the death of Gwen Stacy and when he leaves in the events of No Way Home. And I would have this movie, a lot of it being focused on him shaking that new narrative back into the favor of being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And he would then face off against a Sinister Six. And this would include characters like Venom, Morbius, the Vulture, Kraven the Hunter, Madam Web, and either one of Green Goblin, either played by Dane DeHaan or Chris Cooper if they decide to still go down that reviving the dead route. Rhino, played by Paul Giamatti, as he has been quoted for saying that he would return for The Amazing Spider-Man 3, at least back when the plans were still at least in somewhat motion. Or Black Cat, as she did make a extended cameo appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But my pick would be the Scorpion, as this would then bring a bit more of J. Jonah Jameson's role in this movie a bit more to the forefront, and it would be another villain to help bring that narrative of Spider-Man is a menace, and J. Jonah Jameson is going through his whole creating a villain to take, or creating a hero in his eyes who turns out to be a villain in the true story to take down his supposed villain or the hero of the real story. Or he creates Scorpion to try to take out Peter Parker. And we'd get that classic Scorpion, Spidey with the Sinister Six, with having the whole, jaded hero going against this onslaught of villains. And I would have maybe even partway through the movie, Venom and Morbius at the very least, as we see them being a bit more heroic in their movies as opposed to the other characters. I won't want to speak on Madam Web or Kraven yet, as we don't have their movies yet. It looks like Madam Web might also be one of these villains that would switch sides, as she is looking to be a paramedic in her movie. But at least have Venom and Morbius switch sides and maybe even go up against the other members of the Sinister Six alongside Spider-Man after they learn that Spidey is a true hero. Morbius more than Venom, but maybe something like that would happen. But the movie would then end with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man giving his life to save his reputation, to save New York, and to set everything right. And it would be the one last hurrah of this universe. And I think that would be the coolest way to put this entire series to bed, to give it closure beyond that of No Way Home, and tie everything up in the biggest, best bow possible, while also leaving it behind us and letting us move on 100% into the MCU. And that's how I would like to see The Amazing Spider-Man 3 if we were to get it. Now, if you did like this video, I hope you consider subscribing and like the video if you haven't already. If you have anything you would have done differently, please leave that in the comment section below. Now, if you also did like this video, please check out my DC Cinematic Universe fanfiction, where I talk about 4 hypothetical phases, 15 years starting from Man of Steel, and how I would have done the Snyder vision of DC in my own personal way. Or check out this other video where I wrote an original theme song for Mr. Freeze with a commentary in the captions on my thoughts while writing the music. So, with all that being said, have a very lovely day.